Most photographers don't feel stuck because they're bad at photography. They feel stuck because they're trying to learn everything at the same time, without being told what actually matters first. When learning has no order, confidence doesn't grow. It collapses under the weight of too many decisions. This is about what to learn first in photography, and why waiting on the rest actually helps you progress faster. One of the most common frustrations I hear from photographers is this: I don't know what I should be working on. Not because they lack information, but because they have too much of it. Photography education rarely comes with an order. You're taught exposure, then composition, then light, then editing, then style, then business, then gear. And it all gets presented as if it's equally important, so people try to learn it all at once. That's where things start to unravel, because learning doesn't work well without sequence. Your brain needs structure to build confidence. When everything feels important, nothing feels stable, and instability creates doubt. Most photographers don't realize how much energy they're spending just trying to decide what to focus on. Before they even take a photo, they're already tired. They're asking themselves, should I be learning manual mode? Should I be practicing composition? Should I be editing differently? Should I buy something better? Should I be more consistent? Those questions don't make you better faster. They make you hesitant, and hesitation is exhausting. Here's something I've noticed over years of teaching. Photographers who feel confident are not necessarily more talented. They just know what not to worry about yet. They're not juggling everything at once. They're working in layers. But beginners rarely get permission to work in layers. Instead, they're told, you need to understand all of this. Or, this is basic, you should already know it. That messaging creates pressure, and pressure blocks learning. One of the biggest problems with learning photography online is that tutorials skip context. They show you what to do. They rarely explain when it matters. So people end up trying to master advanced concepts before their foundations are stable. That's like trying to decorate a house before the walls are finished. It looks like progress, but nothing sticks. Another reason learning feels chaotic is because photography combines multiple skills at once: technical skill, visual skill, decision-making, emotional confidence. Those skills don't mature at the same pace, but beginners are expected to use them all simultaneously. That mismatch creates frustration. It's not that you're slow, it's that the expectations are unrealistic. When people don't know what to learn first, they default to what feels productive. Usually, that's watching more tutorials, buying better gear, chasing style. Those things feel active, but they don't always move learning forward. In fact, they often delay it because they add complexity before stability. One of the most important mindset shifts in photography is understanding that not everything deserves your attention at the beginning. Some things matter later. And learning them too early actually slows you down. That's not intuitive. People assume more information equals faster progress. But photography doesn't reward accumulation. It rewards integration. Integration takes time, and it requires focus. Another reason learning order matters is confidence. Confidence doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing enough. Enough to make a decision. Enough to trust yourself. Enough to move forward without second-guessing every step. When learning has no order, confidence never gets a foothold, because every improvement is immediately overshadowed by what you don't know yet. That's discouraging. And discouragement makes people quit, or reset, or assume they're not cut out for this. In reality, most people just need clarity. They need someone to say, this matters now. This can wait. That permission alone reduces pressure dramatically. Another thing worth naming is that learning order protects curiosity. When everything feels urgent, curiosity disappears. You're too busy keeping up. But when learning is sequenced, curiosity has room to breathe. You're not rushing to the next thing, you're exploring the current one. That's where real understanding forms. Another common issue is that people confuse fundamentals with basics. They think fundamentals are boring, but fundamentals are what make everything else easier. When fundamentals are solid, advanced techniques feel accessible. When fundamentals are shaky, everything feels fragile. That's why so many photographers feel like they're constantly almost there. They've touched everything, but nothing feels grounded. A calm learning order changes that. It doesn't make learning slower. It makes it stick. And the goal is not to learn photography quickly. It's to learn it in a way that doesn't burn you out, that doesn't require constant restarting, that doesn't make you feel behind. Learning order is not about restriction. It's about relief. Relief from decision fatigue, relief from comparison, relief from feeling like you're missing something all the time. When you know what comes first, you can let the rest wait. And waiting is not falling behind. Waiting is choosing focus. That's where confidence starts. Before we talk about what to learn first, we need to slow this down for a moment, because this is where a lot of photographers accidentally recreate the same pressure they're trying to escape. They hear learning order and immediately think, okay, just tell me the list so I can do it right. That impulse makes sense, but it misses the point. So here's the pause. Take a breath. The goal here is not to replace chaos with a rigid checklist. The goal is to reduce decision load. Learning order is not about rules. It's about relief. And relief comes from understanding why certain things matter first, not just being told what they are. So let's reframe the question. Instead of asking, what do I need to learn first? Ask, what would make everything else easier if it felt more stable? That's the lens we're using, because photography confidence doesn't grow evenly across all skills. It grows from a few key anchors. When those anchors are stable, everything else becomes less fragile. The first thing that needs to come before almost everything else is camera comfort. Not mastery, comfort. This is where people get tripped up. They assume learning the camera means memorizing settings. It doesn't. It means your hands know what to do without panic. It means you're not fighting the camera while also trying to see. I see this constantly. Someone technically understands the exposure triangle. They can explain aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. But when they're actually shooting, their brain freezes. Because understanding and fluency are different. Fluency comes from repetition in low-pressure conditions. And fluency has to come before complexity. If your hands are still unsure, everything else will feel harder than it needs to be. That's why camera comfort comes first. Not because it's glamorous, but because it removes friction. Once the camera stops demanding your attention, you can actually notice what's happening in front of you, which brings us to the second thing that matters early, seeing light simply. Not mastering lighting setups, not memorizing patterns, just learning to notice light. Where it's coming from, how strong it is, what direction it's moving. This is another place people rush. They think they need advanced lighting knowledge immediately. But advanced lighting only works if your eye can already see basic light. You don't need to name it yet. You just need to notice it. Is it soft or harsh? Is it coming from one direction or many? Is it changing quickly or slowly? That awareness does more for your photos than almost any setting tweak, and it's something you can practice without pressure. Another thing that belongs early and surprises people is decision reduction, not decision making. Decision reduction. Early learning should remove choices, not add them. Same lens, same location, same time of day. Not forever, just long enough for patterns to emerge. When people skip this step, they never feel grounded. Every shoot feels like starting over. That's exhausting. Another thing that belongs early is one compositional idea at a time. Not all of composition, one idea. Leading lines, or framing, or subject placement. Trying to work on composition broadly is overwhelming. Choosing one concept lets you see progress. Progress builds confidence. Confidence makes learning feel possible. Now, here's where people usually push back. They say, but what about style? But what about editing? But what about storytelling? Those things matter. They just don't belong first. Style emerges after repetition. Editing makes sense after exposure, and light feel predictable. Storytelling becomes clearer once you're not fighting the camera. Learning order is not about denying those interests. It's about timing them so they actually stick. Here's something I see a lot. People try to find their style before they're comfortable shooting. So every inconsistency feels like failure. In reality, style is the residue of choices repeated over time. You don't choose it up front, you notice it later. Another thing that can wait, and this one is big, is gear optimization. This is where a lot of energy leaks out. When photos don't match expectations, people assume the problem is the tool. So they research lenses, bodies, accessories. That research feels productive, but it often delays learning because it adds more decisions instead of fewer. Better gear does not reduce decision fatigue, it increases it. That's why gear almost never belongs early in the learning order. Not because gear doesn't matter, but because it doesn't solve the right problem yet. Another thing that can wait is advanced editing techniques. Early editing should be about consistency, not creativity, not mood, not polish. Consistency teaches your eye what your camera is actually doing. Once you can predict results, then editing becomes expressive instead of corrective. Another thing that can wait is external validation. Sharing too early often increases pressure. You're learning and performing at the same time. That splits focus. Private learning space is not avoidance, it's protection. Now let's talk about the emotional side of learning order, because this is where the real shift happens. When people don't know what to focus on, they feel behind. When they feel behind, they rush. When they rush, they skip foundations. When they skip foundations, nothing feels stable, and the cycle repeats. Learning order breaks that cycle. It creates permission to slow down. And slowing down doesn't mean stagnation, it means integration. Integration is what turns information into skill. Here's another reframe that matters. If something feels confusing, it doesn't mean you're bad at it. It means it arrived too early. That's not a judgment, that's timing. I've seen photographers struggle with concepts for years, then understand them instantly later, not because they suddenly became smarter, but because the groundwork was finally in place. Learning order respects readiness. It doesn't force growth, it supports it. Another thing learning order protects is self-trust. When you're not constantly questioning whether you're working on the wrong thing, trust builds. You start making decisions faster, you stop second guessing every setting. You notice improvements instead of immediately discounting them. That shift is subtle, but it's powerful. Another important point is that learning order reduces comparison. When you know what layer you're building, other people's work becomes less threatening. You're not trying to be them, you're doing your work at your stage. Comparison loses its grip when you have context. Another reason learning order matters is because photography learning is not linear. You revisit the same ideas at deeper levels. Exposure isn't learned once, neither is composition. But revisiting something with more experience feels different than learning it cold. Learning order gives you permission to revisit without shame. Now let's name something honestly. A lot of photographers resist learning order because it feels limiting. They worry they'll get bored or boxed in, but boredom usually comes from pressure, not structure. When learning is overwhelming, boredom is often a defense mechanism. Structure doesn't kill creativity, it supports it. Another thing that learning order does is create predictability. Predictability reduces anxiety. When anxiety drops, curiosity rises. That's not accidental. Your nervous system matters in learning. If photography feels stressful, your brain is not in a state that absorbs information well. Learning order helps regulate that. Another practical reason learning order matters is that it reduces restarts.
People who know what comes next don't feel the need to reset constantly. They don't assume they chose the wrong path, they adjust within the path. That's a huge difference. Another thing that comes first, and people rarely talk about this, is learning how to stop. Stopping before exhaustion, stopping before frustration, stopping while you still feel okay. That teaches your brain that photography is safe. That safety is foundational. Without it, learning becomes brittle, and brittle learning breaks under pressure. So, if we were to simplify all of this into one idea, it would be this: what comes first in photography is not information, it's stability. Stability of hands, stability of eye, stability of expectations, stability of energy. Once those are in place, everything else becomes easier, faster, more enjoyable. Learning order is not about restriction. It's about building a base that doesn't collapse. And when the base is stable, you don't have to rush. You can let things unfold in a way that actually lasts.
There's a quiet moment that happens when learning order starts to work. It's not dramatic. You don't suddenly feel confident about everything. What changes is simpler than that. You stop feeling rushed. Photography no longer feels like a race you're losing. You're not scanning constantly for what you should be doing next. You already know. That steadiness matters more than most people realize, because pressure doesn't just affect how fast you learn. It affects whether learning sticks at all. When people learn photography without an order, they're constantly bracing. They're anticipating mistakes. They're worried they're missing something important. They're trying to hold too much at once. That mental tension drains energy, and drained energy is what makes photography feel unsustainable. When learning order is in place, that tension softens, not because photography becomes easy, but because it becomes predictable. You know what your focus is. You know what can wait. You're no longer asking photography to prove itself every time you pick up the camera. Another sign learning order is working is that you stop restarting. You don't feel the urge to wipe the slate clean every few months. You don't assume you chose the wrong path the moment something feels hard. Instead, you adjust within the structure you already have. That's a huge shift because restarting feels active, but it actually delays progress. Staying with a clear learning order long enough for it to settle is what creates depth. Another thing that changes is how you interpret struggle. Instead of seeing confusion as failure, you recognize it as a signal that something arrived early, or that it needs more repetition. That reframe matters because struggle without context feels discouraging. Struggle with context feels temporary. Another subtle change is that confidence stops being loud. You're not announcing it, you're not trying to prove it. You just trust yourself more often. You make decisions faster. You don't second guess every setting. You don't spiral when a photo doesn't work. You adjust and move on. That kind of confidence doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing enough to keep going. Learning order supports that by narrowing focus. When fewer things compete for attention, your brain can relax. And when your brain relaxes, creativity has room to return. That's another quiet benefit people don't expect. Structure doesn't limit creativity, it protects it. Another thing learning order changes is how photography fits into your life. When everything feels urgent, photography competes with everything else. It feels like something you should be doing more of, or better at, or faster with. Learning order removes that urgency. Photography becomes something you return to, not something you chase. That returnability is the foundation of sustainability. If you can return without guilt, you can keep going for years. Another thing that shifts is how you relate to unfinished work. You don't feel the same pressure to complete everything. You're comfortable leaving questions open. You trust that answers will come with time and repetition. That patience is not accidental. It's a byproduct of clarity. Another important piece of sustainability is recognizing that learning happens in seasons. There are seasons of growth and seasons of integration and seasons where things feel quieter. Learning order allows for those fluctuations. It doesn't demand constant output. It allows learning to breathe. That's essential for long-term engagement. Another thing worth naming is that learning order protects your relationship with photography. It keeps photography from becoming a source of self-judgment. When you're not constantly comparing yourself to an invisible standard, photography stays enjoyable. Not every day, but often enough, and often enough is enough. Now here's the reflective moment. Pause here. Think about how photography has felt for you lately. Not how you think it should feel, but how it actually feels. If it's felt scattered, heavy, or fragile, that doesn't mean you lack discipline or talent. It means you've been asked to learn without a map. Most people would struggle in that situation. Clarity is not about doing more. It's about knowing where to put your attention. When attention is focused, effort goes further. And when effort goes further, confidence grows naturally. Learning order doesn't rush you. It steadies you. It creates a container where skills can mature without pressure. And pressure is what burns people out. Sustainability isn't built on motivation. It's built on systems that don't ask too much. Learning order is one of those systems. It quietly supports you in the background. It removes unnecessary decisions. It gives you a place to stand. And from that place, growth feels possible again. You don't need to master photography quickly. You need to learn it in a way that doesn't make you want to quit. That's the difference. And that difference is what allows people to stay. If photography has felt overwhelming or harder to navigate than it should, learning order can change everything. Knowing what deserves your focus first and what can wait reduces decision fatigue and builds confidence naturally. On my website, I share a simple learning order designed to bring clarity when things start to feel noisy. It's there as a reference, not a rule book. You don't need to learn everything at once to move forward. You just need a steadier place to begin.